In the world of lolcows, language remains a barrier. Most people only know about lolcows from Western, primarily English-speaking nations. But that's just so limiting, and we do live in a global age. So let's go beyond our Western bias and turn towards the East. In China, there lives a man named Cheng Ji. He's addicted to buying Steam games, he loves to while watching Bad Sight, and is infatuated with white women. This is James Cage White, the Chinese lolcow.
Hi guys, I'm eating pears. We were very green, very fresh. I like it.
Time to show you.
Okay.
Go on.
James was born Cheng Ji in Chongqing City in the year 1984. His early life remains mostly unknown to us, but we do have a couple random anecdotes to go off of. Per James, his mother went to university before joining the labor force, while his father either finished high school and went right to work, or actually did go to university. For some reason, James has stated both of these as fact, one as a tweet and the other on a dating show. Both his mother and father worked at the same factory, so it's assumed they met there. In 1984, they had James, born right here in this hospital.
This is the hospital. This is where I was born. I was born in this hospital in 1984, October 15th.
James claims he grew up in a literary family, and as a child, he had a quiet personality. In 2003, he began to attend university. He also claims to have dated a girl during this time, but as a 2019 tweet seems to show, they weren't very intimate. After 4 years, in 2007, James would graduate with a degree in English. He also broke up with his girlfriend around that time.
35岁我谈过2段恋爱，第一段是在学校的时候，后来毕业以后我们就分开了。第二段是我工作的时候，由于对方性格有一点强势，在一起不太适合，所以也就分。
In 2011, James would create his Twitter account, which was originally under his real name, Cheng Ji. His first tweet was directed at the wrestler Randy Orton, but that's not very interesting. The better ones are classics like, "If there is a God, why doesn't he help me?" which he would follow up later that day with, "I am poor. I cannot buy an iPhone 4S. Should be said that James has a weird fixation with Jesus and Christianity. He swings rapidly back and forth from praising Jesus, as seen here, to claiming he's an atheist and doesn't believe in an afterlife. He keeps doing this. I'm really not kidding. He's done this probably hundreds of times.
I'm looking for a white woman.
In 2012, James would announce that he changed his name to James Cage White, the meaning behind this name being James for James Bond, Cage for Nicolas Cage, and White for White Woman. The middle name Cage wouldn't be added until 2014. Until that point, he was going only by James White. That same year, he would create a LinkedIn page. On it is a stock company where he worked in sales. Also here was his hotel reception job, which he would keep until 2014 when he decided to quit.
Very cool, very swag. I like it.
Up until this point, James had been throwing his voice out into the online void, with no whim or worry. He had no fans, no followers, and no eyes on him. But that would all change in early 2014. A year before, in January of 2013, a little app called Vine would launch. It would quickly explode in popularity, launching thousands of people suddenly into e-celeb fame, plenty of which would go on into the YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram sphere. It was a historical moment in social media history, and its effects, both good and bad, can be felt today. But let's narrow in on James, shall we? He would post his first Vine in February of 2014. This one was him simply showing off his personal computer.
Okay, everybody, check my PC and my Google Nexus.
But soon enough, after only a few days of being on the platform, the first Vine about white women would appear.
I like white women. I eat chocolate and melon seeds.
Let's take a moment to discuss that particular fascination that James has. Obviously, James finds Western culture interesting. He has a degree in English, he created an English name for himself, and he likes to talk to people from the West. But his obsession with white women goes beyond odd but somewhat amusing and into the realm of absurd and somewhat creepy. He has tweeted, posted, or otherwise mentioned his desire for a white woman thousands and thousands of times. Genuinely, it's a never-ending cycle. Whether it be YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, it doesn't matter. He's always talking about white women. You could probably go to his account right now and find a recent reference to white women. It would be during this early period that he began to use some of the phrases that most people now associate with him. Stuff like very cool, very swag, I like it.
Very cool, very swag, I like it.
There are also other staples like the Gangnam Style and the Ice Bucket Challenge.
Open Gangnam Style. Oh, Gangnam Style. Hi, sexy lady. Ice Bucket Challenge. Very cool, very swag. I like it.
As 2014 went along, James's Vine account continued to grow and he continued to post. By this point, James was well liked, being seen by most as just a silly guy who made videos about his life and liked white women. He wasn't a lolcow, just an odd guy. And that's the opinion of him that would hold for years. In fact, it wouldn't be until Vine itself shut down that James's behavior would begin to change, and so would the opinions people held about him. Vine would shut down in early 2017. Thousands of creators migrated to various platforms, and James was no exception. His platform of choice was Twitter.
Very good, very cool.
In hindsight, this was a pretty poor decision, because it allowed a stream of consciousness to find itself onto the internet instead of staying inside his head. And the semi-curated persona of James the silly guy who spoke in broken English quickly faded away. In the early days of his post-Vine era, it's not surprising that so much of his life began to bleed into his posts. In 2016, James lost his grandmother and his father had a stroke, which must have already worsened his despondent attitude about not finding a girlfriend or wife. Take, for example, this 2018 post, which explains James' attitude. The caption reads, "I can't find a girlfriend. My mother blames me a lot. I'm very sad when I see my father. He ordered me to find a girlfriend as soon as possible." Of course, James is not entirely blameless in all of this. He is a lolcow after all. In another 2018 post, James explains that he broke up with a girl because she wouldn't hold his hand while they watched a movie together. He says, "You guys can blame me, not respect women, not respect people's boundary, not patient, I'm rushing too hard, fast, etc. But I think the most important point is she doesn't like me, she isn't interested in me, she doesn't want to be with me, am I right? And also, I'm sorry, but I have no choice. I feel like she doesn't like me. I really want to hold her hand, but she declined. I feel bad and depressed." Still, by this point, plenty of comments are positive or offering advice, a far cry from his replies these days. The rest of 2018 and 2019 also went poorly for James regarding his love life. During this date, for instance, he made the girl take photos of him at the park. And at this one, he wears a t-shirt with a chain on it to a restaurant. Very classy. On another date, he would tell a girl that his mother thinks she's fat. Turns out women don't like when you do that. All three of these would take place within a 3-week time span, so either it was one very unfortunate woman, or 3. A few months later, he would go on another date. She left within 10 minutes, which would lead James to make a post admitting that at age 35, he had never touched a woman. Things were not going well for James and his love life. Towards the end of 2019, James would take a drastic measure in efforts of solving this mounting issue. He would go on a dating show called Mortal Delight. In terms of helping him to find a girlfriend, it failed dramatically. But it did reveal some facts about James, such as his overbearing mother. During the show, she would interrupt him mid-sentence to say that he didn't live with his parents, but instead lived in an unrenovated second house that was intended for him and his wife whenever she might appear. As far as we know, he was indeed still living with his parents during this time, and lived with them up until sometime in 2022.
我现在跟父母住在一起。
不从来的不从，跟你住在一起。你现在是那个房子没装修在我那，不叫住在一起的。
我现在有2套住房，有1套还没有装修，想等结婚以后装修了再住。
Only moments later, James would admit that naturally he didn't want his mother to appear with him on a dating show.
我就这样来的。
为什么会不希望妈妈来呢？
他来也可以啊，我没有关系。我
是妈宝男，那就是这个。
只要怕被别人误解成妈宝男，所以可能会有点抗拒。
对，有点。
那为什么最终你还是来了呢？
他才挡不住我的脚步吧。
还是因为爱。
Also later, she calls him an elegant Confucian.
在你眼中的儿子是个什么样的人？
我觉得我的儿子是一个比较儒雅。
James being a mama's boy is not new information. Even as far back as 2014, he claimed that his mother gave him everything in life.
My mother treats me very good. She gives me life. She gives me everything in my life.
And even within the dating show itself, one of his dates claims he has no common sense, and it seems that his mother does everything for him.
他在做的时候可能缺乏一些就是生活的一些常识，我觉得
就是平时是妈妈或者家里边做的比较。
And this relationship is further complicated by the fact that it seems she was and probably still is physically abusive. A 2021 tweet has James showing off a yellow bruise and claiming it's from his mother, who struck him after he made her angry. This doesn't appear to be the only time this has happened, as James has claimed that his mother beat him when he was a child. All in all, this complicated, overbearing, and seemingly abusive relationship no doubt contributed to James's current day behavior.
I'm jumping. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So 2019 ended with no girlfriend and certainly no wife for James, and so the next year began. 2020 also led to failure for James. He went on at least 3 dates, none of which went anywhere. Of these 3, the highlight was easily the woman he rejected for not sharing her umbrella, which became a bit of a running meme in the community. Things became so desperate for James that at one point he spent over $1,000 on a marriage arrangement company. Of the 18 girls he introduced, all rejected him. Before we move on to the next arc, now would be the best time to discuss another very important aspect of James's personality and worldview, and that would be fate. If you scroll to any of his accounts for any amount of time, no doubt you've seen him mention fate. For James, fate is his world. Buying Steam game in M, fate. Marriage and divorce, fate. Getting fired or quitting a job, fate. Every aspect of James's life, whether good or bad, is fate. Some may argue if free will is real, or if it's a cope for a world that is predestined from the very start. And perhaps it is true that things are destined in some way or another, but at the same time, it's very hard to stomach that it's fate for James to buy Steam games over and over again. I mean, to show you how ridiculous this gets, look at this tweet. It's his fate to get fat, or it's fate to buy a Steam game. Seeing a monkey on the road is fate. Changing his profile picture is fate. All this, and so much more, is fate. It is the driving belief behind James's entire life. Also here, I'll briefly mention James's addiction. These come in 2 forms. Addiction to M, which is what James calls masturbation, and his addiction to Steam games, which I've already mentioned several times. If you search for Steam game or M on his account, you'll see over and over again how many times he says he'll promise to never do it again, only to immediately break that promise. Even while not having a job, he buys games, and while the M thing got so bad, he had erectile dysfunction surgery. With all that explained, let us move on to the next era. So far, we've discussed James's love life and his failures to secure a long-term relationship, but now we have to talk about his marriage. In 2021, after all those dates that had gone awry in the past few years, James would announce he had finally gotten a girlfriend, and photos of them together would attain over 100,000 likes on Twitter. Within only 3 months of that dating announcement, James said he had proposed to her, and they would soon be married. You might have already guessed that this was not a marriage born out of love or some romantic story, but instead cold hard cash. James had to pay up to $10,000 to his new father-in-law. A hefty price to be sure, but since James had already been rejected 18 times, he might have been getting a little desperate. Unsurprisingly, James was not suited to the marriage life. Right before he was married, James would lose his job. It had been one he'd had since 2017. Despite losing his job right before his marriage, he decided not to tell his wife, going as far as to say it would ruin his marriage. It should be said he wasn't doing that much work at his job anyway. He used his work computer to store personal files, he admitted to playing Dwarf Fortress, he also ate his colleagues' food, and he slept there for some reason. Anyway. So you might be asking yourself, if James didn't have a job, how was he making money? Well, one of the ways was via his Teespring account. Now before this next bit, it should be noted that at this point, James Cage White still had people supporting him and not just hate watching. This all would rapidly change around the time James got married, and one of those reasons was this tweet, where James says that if his child was gay or lesbian, he might beat them in order to, quote, make him back to normal. Naturally, that went over very poorly with James's audience, and his Teespring account would get banned because of it. Now, James does have a variety of other ways of making money, mainly Cameo and PayPal, but at the time, most of his money was made via fans buying t-shirts. By 2018, he had sold over 500 t-shirts. And in 2020, James said, Teespring account was his most profitable project so far. So losing it was a major blow for James financially, not to mention the blowback from fans. And this would mark the turning point where James would really solidify himself as a lolcow. To the surprise of no one, James's response to this whole thing was that everything is fate. Anyway, back to his marriage. By 2022, or only about 7 months of marriage in, things were looking bleak. James would declare that his marriage was in crisis, saying his wife was unhappy with him and she didn't even want to speak to him because he didn't give her much money. Made even worse, he hated his father-in-law, and his wife was already threatening divorce only 7 months in. In August of 2022, his son was born, and a name for the baby boy would be needed. James would claim that his wife and father-in-law were bullying him about naming the child. In fact, it came to a point that she threatened to jump out of a window if he did not rescind his demand to name their son. That very next day, James would put forward an ultimatum. Either he would get to name his son, or they would get a divorce. Unsurprisingly, this ultimatum failed, as only hours later, he would say that his wife and father-in-law were very good at manipulating, and that it was his fate to lose. This was followed up by him saying that he hates his wife and father-in-law, but still likes his kid. And apparently the name that his father-in-law was suggesting was stupid and dumb. Later he posted a photo of himself despondent in his car, which he followed up later that day with a photo of him eating a banana as a reward.
Hi guys, I'm eating a banana as reward. I like banana. It's very yummy, very delicious. I like it.
We don't actually know the names they were fighting over, as that's never been made public. The only name we have is his English name, which is Charles Peter.
Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy.
If for some reason you thought James would be any better of a father than a husband, you would be sorely mistaken. The man was not good at taking care of a newborn. Probably the most infamous example would be him blow-drying his son's diaper rather than buying new ones. At some point, it appears his wife grew sick of his poor parenting and left. The exact date of this is unknown, but it was probably sometime in November or December of 2022. In January, his wife would return with Charles Peter. Perhaps some thought this would be James's second chance and he could get his act together, but this was not the case. On the 2nd of February, James would tweet one word: divorce. Days later, James would admit that he wasn't good at sex, or as he called it, sex. One wonders why you'd continue to have sex with someone after you've already made plans to divorce them. Perhaps a case of hysterical bonding. Anyway, on the 6th of February, he would tweet, "Last few times to hold my son Charles Peter. Cherish the final moments." Another post read, "Everything is fate. I don't blame my wife. It's her fate to divorce me and take away Charles Peter. Peter will grow up in a single mother family. It's his fate. I can't change that. I will be single forever. That's my fate." 10 days later, his wife packed her bags and left, with Charles in tow. Since then, his mentions of either his wife or Charles are rare, though they do come up. We've got stuff like, "I wish my son Charles Peter happy Halloween, hope he still remembers me, probably not," or "I miss my son Charles Peter, hope he is healthy and well. I went to play color balls with my son Charles Peter. He's not here. I play alone." For his wife, we have this: "I had a dream last night. My ex-wife comes back and we are having, then I wake up. I sleep alone on my bed." Now it's time for the final arc. James's post-marriage life has remained largely static. He has yet to find full-time employment, instead resorting mostly to making money from Cameo, PayPal, and t-shirts. He is still addicted to buying Steam games. He is still addicted to watching Bad Sight and M. And he's still claiming he's not balding, despite very clearly Norwooding. I get it, seriously, I do. No one wants to go bald, but there's no way you can examine these two photos and not realize what's going on. It's simply James's fate to bald. It's an endless loop, and until some sort of change happens, it seems James is content to do the same thing every day. So this has been James Cage White, the Chinese Lolcow. Thank you for watching.